Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 170. We're about to take a little bit of a podcast hiatus, just to take a little breather and also stockpile some content for our next season. But before we get to it, we've got a great guest today, a guy who's become a friend in this game. Actually, haven't trained him, but we've had a lot of great conversations over the years. He's got a wealth of knowledge, both from his successes and his struggles on the injury front. So I think there's a lot we can learn there, and really just a wonderful, wonderful guy. Who I think really speaks to a lot of the mentality that our young players need to be successful in this game. So there's some good info in this one, and I think you'll really enjoy it. This episode is brought to you by AG1, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it can be difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can often wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where AG1 can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. That's why I use it daily, as do several of my family members, and we recommend it to a lot of our top athletes. One scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients that work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet to support energy, focus, digestion, and recovery. And this can all happen for less than $3 per day and without taking multiple products. While most nutritional supplements come to market and stay stagnant, AG1 continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing over 50 improvements in the last decade alone. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best tasting nutrition habit on the planet. Whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it'll work for you, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar per serving. They put 75 ingredients through the rigorous NSF certification test to come up with a safe formula that's trusted by some of the world's top athletes, including many of our own at Cressey Sports Performance. Right now, AG1 is giving our listeners a special offer of 10 free travel packets with their first purchase. Just head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim this special offer. These travel packets are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health while you're traveling for games, training, or simply on the go. They can be great counterbalance to the less than ideal on-the-road food options that are out there for a lot of our traveling baseball players. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance of getting nutrient diversity, head to drinkag1.com/Cressey to get 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey. You won't regret it. Today's guest grew up in Missouri and went on to attend Cowley County Community College in Kansas as a shortstop. In 2009, he began the conversion to pitching, and after only 4 2/3 innings pitched, the Cardinals drafted him in the 21st round of the MLB draft. In the years that followed, he appeared in 66 total minor league games, making 48 starts and accumulating 285 innings with a 3.53 ERA and 293 strikeouts. He was first called to the big leagues in July of 2012, and over the rest of the season, he posted a 2.78 ERA while striking out 25 in 22 innings and holding opponents to a 175 batting average against. His stellar rookie season extended to the postseason, where he made 7 scoreless appearances over the NLDS and NLCS, striking out 15 of the total 30 batters he faced in the 2012 playoffs. In the years that followed, he established himself as one of the most dominant closers in the game, but in 2017, he suffered a torn ulnar ligament early in the season and missed most of 2017 and all of 2018. He signed with the Nationals in the 2018 offseason, but battled command issues and injuries in the years that followed, which also include minor league stints with the Tigers and Yankees. In 2020, he returned to the big leagues with the Royals, posting a .87 ERA over 10 and a third innings pitched over 11 games to go along with 14 strikeouts. They traded him to the Padres, where he pitched 9 games for the Padres and allowed no earned runs in 10 innings. Overall, he finished the 2020 season with a 1.90 ERA with 11 saves and 38 strikeouts in 23 2/3 innings. He signed that offseason with the A's, but missed the entire 2021 season with thoracic outlet surgery and a hip labor repair. He signed with the Giants in 2022 and was traded to the Brewers midway through the season, but didn't get to the major league opportunity due to hamstrings and lat injuries. After 2 appearances with the Tigers in 2023, He suffered an elbow sprain and had a second UCL reconstruction. He's now a free agent during his rehab. Please welcome to the show, Trevor Rosenthal. Trevor, it has been way too long. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes, it's always good to chat with the Eric Cressey, as
Oh, come
always.
on
I'm
now.
really looking forward to this, man.
So it's funny, we have baseball in common. We never really trained together, but we have two things that are more importantly in common. We have wives that are absolute savages in the weight room, that were spring training lifting buddies. And we also are the patriarchs of a couple of girl squads. We both have 3 daughters. So that in of itself would probably make for a 3-hour podcast.
Oh, no doubt. To sum it all up, I think we could say that we are all the male or man that our home needs. That's what God has bestowed upon us.
Right on. Well, so, for folks who don't know the backstory, Trevor spent several spring trainings, obviously on the East Coast, and it just so happened that he would stay at Steve Cishek's house, who was a longtime CSP guy, when Steve was away for spring training elsewhere, which happened to be about 5 houses down. And Lindsay would work out at the gym with Anna, and our daughters would hang out. So we spent a ton of time together, talked a lot of baseball and all that. And obviously I was a big Trevor fan from afar, just knowing you as a person. But, I don't know. We always talked about your history, and it's a cool story. I mean, you threw 4 2/3 innings, I think, in college. So it was obviously a big leap of faith for the Cardinals to grab a shortstop and turn him into a big league closer. But talking about like what it was, first off, let's talk about young Trevor Rosenthal. Were you a multi-sport athlete? Was it baseball all the time? How did you get that electric arm?
Yeah, man. No, I mean, and kind of just real quick on what you're saying, the time that I was able to spend with you and your family, huge inspiration.
That's fun.
I'm sure a lot of people that listen to the show know a lot about you over the years, but I really appreciate the impact that you had on me and my development, my career, all those things, and really admire the work that you do as well. So
Thank you very much.
definitely. I was as a young kid, no idea that I would ever be a professional baseball player. I played multiple sports, soccer, football, baseball, a little bit of basketball. I always wanted to play hockey, never had the opportunity, but that sport, maybe I missed my calling. I don't know. That sport seems super fun. But really just spent a lot of time in the backyard with my younger brother, my dad, coming up with games that we could play in our free time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. I didn't realize you were an older brother. I feel like the major leagues are littered with younger brothers. If you go and you look at it, I know I was a younger brother. I grew up playing against my older brothers, friends, and getting my butt kicked in the backyard. But I guess there were quite a few older brothers that made it too. Do you feel like that multi-sport upbringing made a big difference for you? Like it gave you some adjustability when it came time to not just be shortstop, but pitch and all that?
Yeah, I can't say with 100% certainty. I know there were different experiences in each sport that cultivated maybe a little bit of development in areas of competitiveness, of training, or athleticism. I would say football was a big contributor to my strength and conditioning at an early age, especially in high school, and going through a program at that time wasn't available if I was specifically training for baseball. So I would say it was overall good. Relating that to today's world of youth sports, I'm not sure. I mean, that's a hard question to definitely answer today. Things have changed a lot.
I don't think, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but I don't think folks could do what they do now back then. I mean, there wasn't the availability to be that crazy year round. Like you could do it maybe from like a gameplay standpoint, but like the number of training facilities around, things like that were so hyper focused on it, it would have been really hard to to push that out exclusively.
Yeah, without a doubt.
So when you get to college, you're a shortstop, you throw a couple innings and then you get drafted. So maybe tell the story and what they saw in you. And, we'll obviously talk a little about, what were the difficulties in adjusting to pitching.
Oh yeah. What a crazy experience. One, like I said, I had no idea was ever going to happen. And almost for lack of definition, like kind of happened overnight. I know that's something you don't hear very often in major league sports, but no, I was really just noticed by a scout my first time pitching in college, and I wasn't scheduled to pitch that day. I think due to poor performance, and it was a doubleheader. Struggled a little bit the first game playing shortstop, and we didn't have enough pitchers to cover the second game. So I came in, made my first appearance. After that appearance, my coach basically brought me in and said, "Hey, like I think you should do some more pitching for the remainder of the season." And that information came from the scout and the feedback that he had, and he was right. And even though I didn't make many more appearances, every time I came in to pitch, there were a lot of scouts there to watch me. And once I got into the Cardinals organization, I really fell in love with the position, and I've also really enjoyed the more competitive atmosphere, especially the professional atmosphere, not having to worry about class, not having to worry about school, and just focusing on being a professional athlete. That was very enjoyable. And I mean, probably more than anything, the higher level of competition and being around guys who were competing at a more fierce rate was something that I really enjoyed being a part of.
You said that they kind of, when they knew, was it velo alone? Like, did you actually have secondary stuff, or were you just out there throwing 98 past people?
It was purely arm strength, very raw. I threw like a middle infielder. Yeah. Some even said maybe even a catcher. Mm-hmm. It was really raw, and there's definitely a uniqueness, and that's what got the attention with the velocity. But I had to do a lot of work to develop the pitching skills and techniques.
You know, what's interesting, you kind of hinted at it. I know you've developed, like, I mean, you're a great storyteller on Twitter now about some of your experiences. And you even hinted at just like being around pros was a difference maker for you. Were you like acutely aware of that? Like right when you got to pro ball, I was like, hey, I've got to go seek out. I mean, you talk about stories with Bob Gibson. I know, like, you know, Adam Wainwright, you know, Chris Carpenter probably back then too. Like there were a lot of those guys that were around. Did you actively seek out that mentorship? Did it find you? Like, I'm always curious about how people find their mentors and their growth opportunities.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I would say my first experience getting into professional baseball, I was introduced to, at that time, the Cardinals pitching coordinator, who is Brent Strom. Oh, yeah. And if you don't know Brent Strom is an absolute legend, and he's been involved in the game for a long, long time and helped a lot of players. And he really helped me, not just in my development and in my pitching techniques and how to throw different pitches and refine some of those skills, but instilling confidence in me and encouragement. He really made me feel that I was made to do what I was doing, and that encouragement early on, especially coming from him. He has such a unique way, a very talented way of helping the young players, and I was one of them.
That's awesome. Yeah, Brett's, you know, I've known Brett going back to like 2008, 2009, speaking at some of the same seminars, and it was like just a growth mindset guy, like very excitable. Like he wants to learn as much. So I can see how he would be, you know, he would kind of portray that onto a young athlete as well. Like, I'm excited to work with you. It inspires some confidence. That's huge. What, you were prominently a starter in the minor leagues, and moved quickly through the ranks with some comic book minor league numbers, but you transitioned to a reliever really at the time of your big league call up in 12. Like, I think you were a starter all the way through, jumped to the big leagues, and a lot of pitchers really struggle to make that adjustment. Like, I've seen it both ways, where a reliever hates starting because it's just too much time to think about it when it goes wrong. But I've also seen starters probably more so that, you know, they don't know when to warm up. They don't, like, they just can't even figure out, do I go to the dugout after I warm up? Do I stay in the bullpen and come from there? Like, you thrived. What do you think it was that allowed you to succeed so quickly as a reliever? And you were not in like low leverage situations. Like, the Cardinals were a perennial playoff team every year.
Yeah, that's such a really cool question. And I was thinking about this too with yourself. I mean, I'm looking at the trajectory and the career that you've had over really like 2 decades of helping guys, and some of the stories that you've shared with me are just truly amazing. I mean, did you ever envision that you would be to where you are now?
My wife, this is hilarious. Our first date, I told my wife, this is April of 2007. I said, I never want to own a gym. I opened one in July. So I was not big on 5 and 10 year plans.
Yeah, no, that's kind of for me, the same type of story. I remember, gosh, when I first met my wife, Lindsay, it was a similar conversation where we really enjoyed our time together. Obviously, when you first meet your lifetime partner, your soulmate, and you're wildly in love, the thought of leaving to go and play a 9-month season and saying goodbye was it was a tough pill to swallow. But yeah, getting back into the question, and that's where I found myself. All of a sudden, I'm going about my business, and we get the call, and I actually remember that day like it was yesterday. My wife, actually, Lindsay, was in town visiting me, which turned out to be great. We didn't plan it that way. She didn't get to visit very often. She was working as a full-time nurse, but she came in that day to surprise me and spend some time before she went back to work after an off day. So she was in the stands, actually. I was working the radar gun, recording pitchers' velocities. And after the game, the coaches called me in, give me the news that I'm going up to join the big club, and able to enjoy that with Lindsay there, which turned out to be really nice. But when they first called me in, I, first of all, was not thinking that I was going to the big leagues. I was certain that I was in trouble for talking to my wife during the game. I thought the coaches saw me up there and I was getting ready to get in big trouble. And I think that mindset is what ultimately helps me with that transition, because at that time I was so invested into the Cardinals organization and really wanted to do nothing but help the team win in any way possible. So the thought that I wasn't going to be a starting pitcher or a reliever, whatever inning I was pitching, even if they required me to clean up the towels at the end of the day, I mean, I just wanted to help the team win, and I was fully bought in. And I think more than anything, that helped me have success in that transition process.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, I'll never forget Tim Collins, who's one of our like longest tenured guys. He's retired now, but Timmy was one of our first guys to really kind of like come up through our system, get to the big leagues. And he made his debut opening day of 11. And I'll never forget, it was like a few weeks later, he picked up his first major league win. And he called my business partner, Pete, who was one of his really close friends. And I'll never, like, Timmy's 21 years old, and he's driving like after the game, expected to call him like, hey, this is awesome, let me tell you all about it. He calls, he goes, hey, Pete, can you buy screwdrivers at Walmart? And Pete's like, yeah. He's like, all right, gotta go. He literally just, like, he was outfitting his apartment or whatever it was. And it was just so like, it was typical of what Timmy could do, is he could like turn it on and turn it off. And I think relievers have to kind of have that short memory, both of when it's going good and going bad. Was that something that you were able to grasp early on? Because everyone blows a save, like everybody, misses the zone, and then everybody goes out and punches out the side on 10 pitches. Were you able to kind of to wipe the slate clean no matter what happened? Was that something that you just had?
Yeah, I not necessarily intentionally. I joke around that it might have been short-term memory loss.
Yeah.
I used that analogy for a long time. Maybe, just too dumb to quit, and you just keep showing up, which a lot of the time can be a great attribute, but it really is. And I think that's a valuable lesson learned, that you gotta take the punches sometimes. Yeah. And your worst day, is oftentimes the defining moment. The best day is coming right behind it. So that's very fortunate to learn those lessons.
That's awesome. Building on that, you debuted in 2012, and like I said, you jumped into some high leverage situations. I mean, I remember you. I want to say you didn't give up a run in the postseason in 12 or 13. I remember you throwing in the 13 World Series, in your second year in the big leagues. A lot of times they talk about, pushing young pitchers into scenarios too young, as being a cause for some of the long-term failures that you may see, where a player just doesn't pan out developmentally. It clearly didn't set you back. Like you thrived in the years that followed. Do you think that was a function of how you were wired? Do you think the Cardinals had a very specific plan for how they were going to manage you? Like, I guess the big question is, why did it go so well when you were pushed so young?
Yeah. And as I've matured and gained experience in the game, it's become more interesting to me to understand how teams position talent and evaluate the process to best help players contribute, and also for them personally to succeed. I believe it's case by case. Not all players are the same. Some are ready sooner. Some need more time to mature. And honestly, some never mature.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt though that there's a law of, I think, science where momentum, either way, positive momentum, negative momentum, it's powerful. In putting players in the best position to build the positive momentum is important. And I was really lucky that was able to create that positive momentum early on and build on it. But the function of how that developed, I think, is complex. So trying to understand that more now, there's no doubt the influence that I had from coaches with the Cardinals helped me develop that. And I have to say, my parents gave me a tremendous advantage by the way they raised me. They showed me the value of hard work and respecting others and opportunities. And it wasn't something that I was able to master right away, but once I realized the opportunity that I did have in baseball and I applied the discipline, I think that was really the only reason I was able to achieve the type of success that I had. It was hard, and I think looking back now is probably the number one lesson that I learned from my career up to this point, and something that I can apply in all areas.
I know you are you're like a student of the game. I mean, nutrition, training, recovery strategies, all that stuff. So when you're getting ready, you're 27 years old, right? Or whatever it is, you're preparing to go out and close a major league game. What's your prep look like from the time you get to the field to the time that pre-pitch clock, you're probably coming into a game at 9:30, a 7:00 start if it's the 9th. What do you do over the course of that day? Because I think the casual fan sees like the kind of the eyewash warm up that takes place on the line, and they see relievers messing around with each other and eating sunflower seeds and stuff like that. I don't think they ever understand what actually happens in really like the 5-6 hours before that. What would a typical day at the park look like if you were going to close that night?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I need to maybe do some content creation around that. That's most people, to me, it seems normal, but like you said, the average fan has no idea. Even friends, my neighbors at the time, with a 7:00 game, they were asking me to hang out up until 5:00, and then I'd have to explain to them, no, I get to the field at noon or 1:00. We're getting to the field 6 hours before the game, even when the game starts. That doesn't mean I'm playing. I have a few more hours until my job becomes available. But being a professional athlete, like you're talking about, studying nutrition, studying training techniques, it's a 24/7, 365 job. And all of the players that have longevity approach it that way. And you really have to take care of your body and your mind. And you can only spend so many hours training or practicing your sport. And there's a lot of other time in the day that you have to fill. And so I would develop a routine. It was typically the same, especially on a year basis, year to year. Some years it might change depending on if I have a different injury or something that I'm working on to get better at. But the day would start from tracking how much sleep I got the night before, hitting my hydration goals, hitting my nutrition goals, arriving to the stadium with enough time to get my body in a position where I was ready to do training. I would do strength training, conditioning, and then getting my body in a position to do my throwing practice. As a professional thrower, there's a lot of different techniques and drills that have become available, and a lot of experimenting with those things and finding ones that made me feel good. And I think with talking about the whole routine, the whole process, that's what it all comes down to, is when that 9th inning rolls around and that phone rings, we need Trevor Rosenthal to be more confident than anything. And so I would structure my day to go hour by hour and leading up to that full phone call, to where I was ready to go, not just physically, but also in a really good spot mentally.
We interrupt this podcast with a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by AG1. It's an NSF-certified all-in-one superfood supplement that features 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs. I use this product daily myself, and a ton of our athletes do as well. Head to drinkag1.com/Cressey and claim my special offer of 10 free travel packets with your first purchase. AG1 gives you peace of mind that you're covering all your nutritional bases. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Cressey, Cressey, and you'll get that special offer.
What was like innings 5 through 9? I'm curious because being in baseball now, I'm 4 years deep, like seeing how different closers prepare. Like I've seen some guys that don't even sniff the bullpen till like the 8th inning, spend a lot of time underneath. But for you, what was kind of your routine over, 5, 6, 7?
Yeah, I was lucky. The Cardinals had a really nice tradition where bullpen guys spent. We were expected to spend most of, if not the whole entire game, out there with the boys. So I was fortunate for that. I think that was a good tradition to uphold. I would say by the time I got to the 5th inning, I was more on the over prepared side. So the 5th inning, that's when I would start my routine of walking around, getting loose, maybe an inning of stretching, maybe an inning of dynamic warm up, and then an inning of plyo ball, getting pitching specific movements warmed up. And then from there, as we got into the middle of the 7th, 8th inning, focusing on heart rate, getting my heart rate up a little. I like to pitch with my heart rate elevated. I thought that gave me a nice advantage, especially in a short stint of work. And then take a little bit of time in preparation for that phone call to mentally I like to say I would make the situation seem more important than it was. And that, I feel, helped me with my adrenaline. I would really want to create like a life and death situation in my mind, even though we're playing just a game, we're playing baseball, I'm throwing a baseball. But for me, making the situation more of an out of body experience, I felt helped me get that tunnel focus.
I love that's an art too. Like being able to flip the switch and we talked about C-Shek being a close friend. Like Steve is like the most wonderful human being. Like, and he could just literally flip the switch and it would not be all rainbows and butterflies. Like the second he got on the mound, I remember Brandon Kinsler talking about like, he always just thought about other guys trying to take food off of his family's table. Like everyone kind of has to go to a different place. So it's cool that you would actually harness the ability to tap into that for sure. How did you view like almost like scouting reports for opposing players? Because like nowadays there's a lot of talk about, you having a lane, things like that. So when you're looking at the 6th, 7th innings, are you starting to think about like, hey, we've got these guys that are going to throw this, and when I have the 9th, I'm probably going to face 4, 5, 6 versus 7, 8, 9? Did you start to mix that in, or was it more just like you focus on you and don't worry about that because it's a distraction?
Yeah, for me personally, I thought it was a really good advantage to do my homework, to have a plan for each individual hitter. Whether or not that made a big difference, I think it was more on the mental side. I felt over prepared. I liked to feel over prepared in those situations. And so, I would have a plan. I would see the guys coming up, and I would already have a plan in place of how to attack. Whether that transpired exactly or not once I got in the game, it didn't really matter. I felt that gave me a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, for sure. So, we've talked about a lot of the prep stuff, but then like, let's talk about like the rehab side of things. Your UCL unfortunately went in 2017, and you missed 2018 to rehab your Tommy John surgery and signed with the Nationals in 2019. Didn't go smoothly. I know you wrestled with some command issues during the season. I remember when they sent you back down to, I think, the FCL to work on some stuff. You and me and Anna and Lindsay went out to dinner, and it was like one of those like most frustrating things ever, because we cared about you so much and we wanted to help, and there's no like idea of like what to say. I think we hear so much, and you obviously righted the ship. You came back in 2020 and we're a different guy. It was electric, but we hear a lot about success rates with Tommy John surgeries, like over 90% positive. And, you got like teenage parents who are like, I'm going to get Tommy John for my kid. He's going to throw harder. But we rarely hear about people who struggle to find their way back on the tail end of the rehab. And you were one of those guys. So, obviously we're talking 3 years later, 4 years later. In hindsight, is there anything that you would have done differently with your rehab or your progression back that you feel like, I'm sure you beat yourself up and thought about this a lot, that would have made that return smoother? I know you had thoracic out later, which we'll talk about. Do you think there was maybe an element of that in play? Like what's your hindsight as 2020 take on it?
Yeah, that process was a hard lesson to learn. The hardest part about Tommy John surgery is the length of time you're out of the game. 18 months working back to get on the field. I worked really hard. I worked my butt off. To not have the results, those are some tough times, and especially I remember getting together with you, and man, you're discouraged
Yeah.
for sure, especially after 18 long months of hard work. But I think looking back now, there was a time in 2015. I was one of my best seasons. I actually made the All-Star team that year. Set a record for franchise single season saves. I was having a great season, and I had a couple rough innings late in the season, and I had this idea. I was going to have this conversation with our manager, Mike Matheny, and I'm asking him and letting him really know I had some ideas of things I wanted to change. And I pitched him my ideas, and he responded that he didn't think I needed to change anything, that I just needed to keep doing what I was doing. And his response was frustrating to me because I felt that, it wasn't working out and I needed to make some changes. And this is really what happened to me during my Tommy John recovery. I had all this time and I thought, there's something I did wrong. There was something that I needed to change. I needed to change my mechanics while I had this 18-month window. So I went to work and I was starting to tweak my mechanics, and long story short, it didn't work out. The changes I made.
What was the change? Like, I'm genuinely curious because I know there's a lot of like, I guess, perception across the industry about like what's better for an elbow, what leads to more predictable mechanics, or repeatable, I should say.
Yeah. Without going super far into detail, I mean, I spent a lot of time researching these things, which is an advantage now. I've learned a lot, and it wasn't a complete wash because there are a lot of things that I could take away from it that helped me to get back on track. At the time, and even today, I think the hip to shoulder separation movement, some linear force production things, and then so that was on the mechanic side, and on the training side, I had the idea that I was a big long toss guy. So removing long toss from my program, only going to 90 feet, not making as many throws. Those two things were the biggest changes that I focused on. And those two things were the things at the end of the 2019 season, when it didn't work, I basically threw any type of mechanical adjustment out the window, went back to I guess you could say, feel that I had pitched with in the past. Went back to my long toss routines. The Yankees gave me a nice throwing program, and it was based more on volume, and that it involved long toss and also involved more volume. And adding those two things back into my routine that I had done previously helped me get back to where I was prior to surgery.
That actually makes a lot of sense. You're always kind of like a shorter arm action. You talked about catcher, shortstop, and like long toss does force you to get longer. You don't see like a lot of guys long tossing from their ear, so it probably gave you just the right amount of length that you actually needed in your arm stroke. That's really interesting. And I think a lot of times we see guys that try to change arm actions when in reality, like the arm kind of just does what the direction from the back hip tells it to do. So sometimes like upstream works more. So obviously you found your delivery. You had a great 2020, got traded at the deadline, I think, to the Padres, and we're really, really good down the postseason. But 2021 thoracic outlet surgery. I'm curious about the TOS. I've done a ton of work in this space, something that's kind of a labor of love for me. And what's unique about TOS is it's often a diagnosis of exclusion, right? It's the symptoms can move around. Some people, kind of have the frank blood clot that just is the dead giveaway. And then a lot of people just kind of deal with like numbness or tingling, and they think it's kind of normal. Some doctors even still like deny that it's a real thing. How did your experience with it unfold? Like what were your symptoms, and was it a tough diagnosis?
Yeah. So that year had the TOS and the hip. The hip was a problem. It couldn't be ignored. Torn hip labrum, a lot of pain, could barely walk. That was really straightforward. The TOS was, like you're saying, it was in my case, not so much a situation of exclusion, but I did have discomfort. I did have symptoms. And once I started seeing the doctors, honestly, I was on the table getting the procedure before I really had time to process what was going on. And as we know in the sports world, and things happen fast, teams want to make decisions quickly to get you back on the field. And that was part of it. But looking back, it's really hard to fully understand. I know now today, I recovered really well and I feel great still. So I'm thankful for that. Everything is gone as they expected. But I agree. I think there's a lot of questions around it. And I know players, I have some friends that just had the surgery a few weeks ago and trying to help them get through that process. But the encouragement is it's gone really well for me so far.
What were I've heard guys come out of that surgery and be like, oh my God, I could open my hand for the first time in like forever. You know, I had another athlete who told me, he's like, I feel like I never get sick anymore. I was like always congested. And, you know, some of it may be, you know, a little bit of placebo effect or like that. When you came out of that, were there things that you almost recognized, like, I forgot what it was like to feel good? Because we do know that, you know, basically the blood flow to a pitcher's arm is restricted. Like that's well established for pretty much every, you know, every pitcher, regardless of level, is that's an adaptation that takes place. And, you know, nerves and vascular structures in many cases course the same, you know, path down to the arm. Did you come out of that surgery feeling dramatically different?
I did. That was, yeah, I would fall in that category. Woke up, first of all, woke up in extreme pain. That's an extremely painful surgery, especially moving the rib. They removed my pec minor as well, which that was one of the tougher things to recover from.
Yeah, that release is
and I
tricky.
I was worried about that affecting my performance and strength as well, but it's been good. Definitely something mentally weird to understand, but I felt better. I would say just more free throughout my arm and had some of that. Got rid of the numbness. The numbness was the biggest thing that I was experiencing.
Absolutely. So came back, did your thing for a little time there, got back to throwing this year. You know, and you know, I guess one of the things I'm curious about, like, so maybe big picture is, so your ligament went on you this spring. You know, you're one of the first guys to throw 100 miles an hour, like consistently. Like you did it before it was cool. So it worked well until, you know, age 28. The injuries have started to pile up. You know, you're 33 now, and you're figuring out what's next for you in baseball or beyond after this last surgical intervention from spring training. So I'm curious, as you look back, are there things that you would adjust, whether it's training, throwing program, your delivery, how you approach recovery, you know, really anything? You know, I deal with a lot of guys over the age of 30, and I'm always curious, like, what made you feel better as you aged, as the volume piled up? And, you know, what works when you're 21 doesn't always work when you're 33. So, I mean, where's your head at now after this latest surgical intervention? Are you contemplating these things and approaching things differently?
Yeah, without a doubt. I wish I knew then what I know now.
Yeah.
I hope that I could record a lot of the earned knowledge and experience that I've gained and put it in a format to help educate future athletes. I mean, I know my hip injury was due to mostly anatomy dysfunction and overuse. And going back to the pitching scouting reports, I mean, I always wanted to feel over prepared than under prepared. So I was a guy who did probably a little bit extra in the weight room, a little bit more throwing. And that was, you know, the horse that I was willing to die on. But I could have definitely helped prevent that injury in particular by having some better technique training, which we've talked about. I've had those conversations with you. I know you've helped a lot of athletes with that, particularly in the back squat. And then I think, or just choosing different resistance training movements altogether, are some things that I've learned over the years. But I think the elbow injury is a little bit more complex, so it's hard to speak with certainty on that issue. I know learned a lot going through reconstruction surgery twice now. Both times tore the ligament and the tendon, and both times it happened on a single pitch. So it was definitely a lack of elbow stability training, and I think also poor mechanics, not necessarily over a long period, but on those particular days. But yeah, putting an abnormal amount of stress on the elbow, and definitely the rapid elbow extension or hyperextension, just more force than it was able to handle at that time. But it's always a learning process, and that's how I've always approached it. And I've been extremely blessed to have the opportunities I've had, and so more than anything, learn from it and then help the next generation.
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting kind of discussion just because we're actually like at the point where like performance is almost outpaced sports medicine, right? Like, guys weren't meant to throw 100 miles an hour, and each year the velocity ticks up, and bullpens get way more specialized and all that stuff. And I think the general consensus in the industry is like every mile per hour increase is probably a 15 to 20% UCL injury risk. So you mix in necks, you mix in shoulders, you mix in lats, all these different things, and obviously hips as well. Like, we're really, kind of testing the limits of what, high performers can endure. Particularly when you mix fatigue in, you mix travel, all those different things. So it's a discussion we obviously got to keep having. I think it's so helpful for guys like you to share your stories and, have like an open minded on what you might have attacked differently and what worked for you, so we can kind of keep building that out better. So we'll build on that. So we always do like a lightning round as we kind of trend towards the end of some of these interviews. I'm sure you're well positioned for this, and you've had the highs and lows across several organizations. When you look back on all the coaches you've had, I know you talked about Brett Strom as one of them. What were some of the characteristics of the ones that you think had the most positive impact, like who favorably impacted your career?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Now, getting into I talked about this. Getting into professional baseball was the best thing that ever happened to me. It's one of the most competitive industries to be a part of. It's hard to understand that at 19 years old, but in order to be successful, you're forced to learn that. The coaches that helped me the most were the ones that held me to that standard. They didn't protect me from failure. They let me know when I needed to improve. More than that, they exemplified this character in their own lives. Actions always speak louder than words, and I was blessed to be influenced by those men of character, and they went about their work, and they set the example for me, and that was something that I really wanted to follow.
That's awesome, man. I love that point of like seeking out, sometimes, not just constructive feedback, but like feedback that's hard to hear, like that you need, but they're not afraid to give it to you. I love that. So this one is interesting. I've never asked this question because I don't know anyone who has a high performing 9-year-old, 8-year-old.
Yeah, she's 9.
Yeah. So your oldest daughter is she's a stud gymnast. Like, this is something that's really important to her. She's got that itch to be special. And I know you have a perspective not only as a professional athlete yourself. Lindsay gets after in a weight room. I know she takes her training seriously, but your oldest daughter is really a big time aspiring gymnast. And you guys have obviously made some big sacrifices so she can attack that. I'm curious, like, what are the things that you think about on a daily basis? Like, you want to impart wisdom as a pro athlete to your daughter about competing at a high level, but at the same time, you want that sport to remain fun. You don't want to be the overbearing dad. Like, what are your like key checkpoints as a dad for making sure that she continues to have like this amazing relationship with athletic participation while she's still developing?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, definitely a tough one. You go to any youth sporting event, you're going to see all kinds, but
it's your first. It's not like you had 2 kids that have done this yet. The younger ones get the blessings of what you learn now, right?
Yeah, and I'm still learning how to do things too. I'm only 33 years old, so there's a lot of responsibility and trying to pass on the good and get rid of the bad. But no, it's super fun. It's really scary to watch, especially gymnastics.
Yeah.
Her mindset is unbelievable. She has a lot of the same mindset that I've had. I can see it in her from my baseball career, and then with Lindsay's mental fortitude and her ability to be disciplined and push through hard times is something that I see in her, and it's exciting. But she works extremely hard. She takes it very serious, and it pays off in a big way. And I think, like, I view it as like my role as a parent. As much as I want to be her coach or her trainer, I have to know, like, okay, I'm her dad, and what can I do as a dad to best support her? And I think that goes to having a safe home, a happy, healthy environment for her to live in, and that comes from how I treat her mom, how I treat Lindsay, and having a good marriage is, I think, one of the best things you can do for your children, and especially for girls. So that's what I try and focus on. as much as I want to get her in the weight room and get her
She'll find
some
it.
hypertrophy,
Yeah.
like all those things, I think they'll come. But and I'm keeping an eye on it. I'm helping her out. But more than anything, I try and be her dad and support her, and not make it about the results or what she does or doesn't do, but just knowing that I do expect her to work hard, and I want to pass along that respect and those work ethic disciplines.
I think that's awesome. I'm a big believer that more is caught than taught. You know what I mean? I think too many parents try to like perfectly manicure the experience. You know, and we call them like the snowplow parents. They're different than helicopter parents. Like snowplow parents just like clear the way of any obstacles. It's like, no, parenting it's guardrails. It's don't go outside of these lines. And then in the middle, you have a lot of poetic license, and then you model the behavior. Like I'm sure she saw mom and dad eating well, mom and dad making gym trips important, dad, recognizing what it took to compete at the highest level. That stuff, I don't think you can overstate how important it is. That's good stuff. On that same line of thought, you're a lifelong learner. We talked about your interest in everything from a training, nutrition, throwing side of things, always trying to consume info to get better. What are some books, whether it's baseball related, personal development, anything like that you think athletes out there should definitely check out?
Yeah, there's so many. I've become such a avid reader. I love reading now. I love learning, and so many opportunities to self-educate in today's world. But right now I'm reading a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Shin. It's a really cool book. It talks about the power of thoughts. And I think learning to control your thoughts is a great advantage of life. And we're not necessarily taught that in our society. We're taught more to just ride the waves and go where directed. And this is something, going back to Brent Strom and his impact on me, that he always said, especially as a coach, is you're trying to get somebody to do something. Well, we're trying to get an action. Where do actions come from? Actions come from thoughts. So everything kind of starts with the thought, and you control your thoughts. It has a downhill effect from there. And then another book that I read in the last couple of years, I think you'll really enjoy it. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Natural Born Heroes.
I could add that to the list.
Yeah, Christopher McDougall. He wrote another book, Born to Run.
Yeah, okay, he's the Born to Run guy. That's what it was. Okay.
It's a great book. It has some wartime adventures from but then it also talks a lot about natural movement and the strength of the fascial system. And not what I expected getting into this book. I had a Navy SEAL friend actually recommend it to me, but as I got into it, I'm like, man, this is really cool, and talked about some topics that I wasn't expecting. But those two are really good.
That's good stuff. I just wrote that down. That's going to be an Audible audiobook purchase right after we get off this call. All right, last question. Advice for a teenage Trevor Rosenthal. You could go back, 15 years. What are you telling yourself?
Man, exactly. I wish I knew then what I do now. That's always what you hear, and it's so true. But I think number one, advice to dream big, not just to dream big, but to dream with or think with long-term thinking. I wish early in my life I didn't have as much of a short-term view. I thought it was maybe limiting in some ways. It made the short-term failures and successes seem like bigger waves than they were, or than they are in the big picture. So I guess, that would be. I don't know. What about you? Do you have any? I'm sure you got something.
My goodness. I mean, outside of like invest in Microsoft, all that stuff. I wish that I had really understood nutrition at a younger age, because I think I was a good sleeper, but like, I think that nutrition is one of those like upstream things that can be such a difference maker, particularly for young athletes. Like when you look at kids that are falling asleep in class or not having the energy to compete the way they need to, I think it's one of those things that favorably impacts everyone. And I wish I had thought of it before I got into this career. If I had had that at 12, 13, I think it would have been different.
All right. That's another one I can thank my parents for. My parents were we grew up in the Midwest, Nebraska, corn-fed steaks, and clean your plate, sit at the table until your plate's clean. So I love that. Thankful for that. Today, getting my 3 daughters to adhere to those guidelines, not very easy, but we're
you're
getting there.
you're in good company on that one. Hey man, this is awesome. I mentioned it before, but you have a great Twitter presence. It's at Trev Rosenthal. Definitely would encourage everyone to check you out. Dude, I can't thank you enough. This was fun to catch up. It's long overdue, and big fan of your family and your career. And we'll be cheering for you if you do make the decision to make another go at it.
Likewise, man. I appreciate that and admire you more than you'll ever know. So this has been a pleasure. Let's not spend so much time in between.
I agree.
Conversations. Yes.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Eric.